We have lots to discuss here in today's video, including some offseason trade speculation between the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Islanders. We'll take a look at that. Plus, we have big news out of the Islanders organization as well, including the fact that GM Muriel will not return. We're going to be getting a new regime within that front office. We'll discuss how that could work out for the future. What does that mean for the coaching staff, including Patrick Roy? Big news out of Seattle as well regarding their front office changes, signing in San Jose, bunch of injury updates, and a whole bunch of news from the Stanley Cup playoffs, plus the 2018 World Junior Championship Canadian team trial for the 5 players facing assault charges begins today. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in today's video. First up, a couple of news regarding some prospects and some signings. The San Jose Sharks today have signed Matt Davis, who's a 2-time national champion U.S. college goalie from the University of Denver. A pretty good pickup here, in my opinion. He gets an AHL deal for next season. Davis had a real solid college career. I thought there'd be a number of teams that I think were interested in possibly signing him. A real good pickup for the Sharks. In my opinion, a low risk, potentially high reward type of situation there. So Davis will be with the Barracuda for next season. And we also learned today that Danila Yurov, the 21-year-old who was the first round pick of the Minnesota Wild back in 2022, taken 24th overall, has departed the KHL, will be heading to North America, and is expected to sign here with the Minnesota Wild just about any time. As I record this video, the team has not yet announced the signing, but it should be happening either sometime in the next couple of days. We don't have a firm timeline here just yet. Now, as I mentioned, lots of action around the Stanley Cup playoffs, some big injury updates and other news for games taking place this evening. The New Jersey Devils are going to be without a couple of key defensemen, Luke Hughes and Brendan Dillon. They're both out with injuries. Cody Glass was able to return and play this evening. They're doing game 2, of course, against the Carolina Hurricanes tonight in Raleigh. As I record this video, they were at the end of the first period with a 1-0 New Jersey lead. As reported a few nights ago when the playoffs first started by Elliotte Friedman on Hockey Night in Canada, he was saying that the NHL was really scrutinizing a lot of LTIR cases a lot closer this time of year, and was wondering about how that would affect a lot of teams as they get into the playoffs, and might be the reason why we didn't see players like Gabriel Landeskog play in the first game or two of that series in Colorado, or also with Edmonton and Evander Kane. But with Florida today, they confirmed that Matthew Tkachuk is activated and ready to go for tonight's game. Now, of course, it's always possible he goes out for warm-ups and doesn't play. That is a possibility. Doesn't look like that's going to be the case, so Paul Maurice has been saying that he expects Tkachuk likely does play. So it just seems weird, because I know with Friedman's report, he was saying that basically the NHL was kind of talking to these teams and looking into these cases and saying, okay, why is it they couldn't play game 82, but they could play game 1 of the playoffs just a few days later? Like, what changed during that time frame that allowed the players' health to be, drastically different enough to make an impact on whether or not they can play a hockey game? So I'm curious to see how these teams handle this, what exactly was scrutinized, and if there really is much to that. But yeah, we are expecting Landeskog to jump into the lineup for the Avalanche in Game 3 tomorrow night as the Avalanche return home. And it is quite possible, based on what we're hearing as well, that in Game 2 of the Oilers-Kings series, that Evander Kane very well could suit up for Edmonton in that one. So we'll see what happens there. But that's what we know on those guys. Like I said, a couple of big updates for New Jersey. Washington as well. Defenseman Martin Verhaeghe is going to be out for the rest of the playoffs after having knee surgery. He won't be making a comeback. And in Dallas, Miro Heiskanen did travel with the team on their flight to Denver for games 3 and 4. No guarantee he plays, but at least he's with the team, so there's a chance. Jason Robertson, on the other hand, did not travel, so it's very likely that he's not available for those games as well. Of course, last night saw some pretty entertaining hockey. We saw some overtime. One game we thought was going to overtime and ended early. The Jets-Blues game was a 2-1 victory for the Jets as they take a 2-0 series lead over St. Louis. A little closer, a little tighter. The Blues again battled hard, but the Jets reigned supreme in that game and came out on top. Of course, now the series shifts to St. Louis, so we'll see if they can carry that momentum with them. Of course, Washington, Montreal was entertaining, and early on it looked like Washington was going to run Montreal over. They were certainly the much bigger, stronger, and more physical team. It kind of looked like Montreal was kind of getting pushed around, but Samuel Montembeault was pretty solid and didn't let the game get too far out of reach. It was a 2-0 Washington for quite some time, and then Montreal in the third period, like they seem like they always do. I'm not sure how they have this uncanny ability in the third period, but they never seem to be out of a game. And in the third, they got one goal, and then they get another goal late from Nick Suzuki to tie it up. And I was like, okay, Montreal might win this game. Like, they were the better team later into the third period, carrying over into the overtime. They had the momentum shift. Like, I really thought Montreal was going to pull that out after how things shifted in the third period. But Alex Ovechkin came out fairly early in the first overtime and won the game. It was on a deflection in front. Definitely some good hand-eye coordination there from Ovi. And little did I realize until the broadcast confirmed it, but after everything that Ovechkin has accomplished in his career, that's the first time he's ever had an overtime winner in the playoffs. Didn't know that. I mean, as much as you know all kinds of these useless facts about hockey, that's not something I realized that he hadn't done. It's a pretty crazy stat on that front. Dallas and Colorado was a tight game as well. Went to overtime. It was looking pretty good for the Avalanche to win, but the Dallas Stars got it tied up in the third. Went to overtime, and Colin Blackwell ended up being the hero there late in the first overtime. So that one's all knotted up at 1. And in the other game, Edmonton-LA was off to a bad start for Edmonton. Some bad defensive plays, some bad goaltending from Stuart Skinner. Not all Skinner's fault. I mean, there was a variety of things there. I would blame him for a couple goals. Bouchard had a nice pizza right up the middle of the ice. Just wasn't going their way at all, and it was 4-0 LA. And the Edmonton Oilers ended up having one heck of a third period, coming all the way back and getting it tied 5-5 with like a minute and a half to go. But then they blew it. The Edmonton Oilers managed to lose a game with a minute and a half to go. Philip Deneau had an opportunity for a one-timer down in the Oilers zone. He flubbed it, went off like the heel of a stick, and then I think it might have even deflected off something and it was going in the air. Skinner couldn't see anything. Warren Fogle had a screen in front where he was jumping to kind of not only screen him, but avoid getting hit. And it just floated right in. And I don't really think you can blame him in that scenario because he couldn't see anything. He had to guess, and unfortunately he guessed wrong. And puck goes in, game's over. I mean, essentially over. So after all that work, they blew it. And to be honest, Knobloch, the coach of the Oilers, played Leon and Connor together a lot in that period. They were fortunate with some icing calls and TV timeouts, and then they used their own timeout trying to keep getting them a little extra rest to keep throwing them back out there. And they went very aggressive. After getting it tied at 5-5, they had another icing call, I believe it was, and then they put them back out. After all that ice time, they were going for the win, trying to get another goal late and have a 6-5 regulation win instead of pushing it to overtime. They could have put out a fresher line, maybe played it a little bit safer, guys that still have scoring ability. But no, actually ended up being a McDavid turnover, which led to the play going the other way. And I'm sure those guys were tanked at this point, and that's what led to the goal. So little over-aggression there, but I think the Oilers they settled into the series. I think they have a chance to still win this, but it's certainly going to be tough to beat LA again on home ice. So very interesting series there on how things have started. Now, as I mentioned, we also had a couple of items as well regarding some regime changes today. Seattle's a little different. The Seattle Kraken today, as we discussed a few days ago, the rumor was that Ron Francis was going to be moving from the GM role into an elevated president of hockey operations role, and then they've elevated AGM Jason Botterill to general manager. So Francis, who's been there from the time the team started, obviously he was with them, almost quite a while before the first season, obviously leading, helping them through the expansion draft and all that stuff. So he's been there for quite some time. The team has accomplished absolutely nothing. They had a miracle, in my opinion, where everything went right in their second year and they made the playoffs. And in the last 2 years, it's been setback after setback after setback, coming back down to earth, and they've done worse and worse. And he gets promoted. Like, no disrespect to Ron Francis, he was a phenomenal player, but he's got to be one of the worst GMs ever in the NHL. His tenure in Carolina stunk, in my opinion. Not good. Gets the job in Seattle. The expansion draft was terrible. I could question several of those picks. There's been a few good. Not everything he's done has been bad, but this team, I don't understand how 4 years of failure gets you a promotion. I don't understand that. So I'm not in favor of it. Jason Botterill, had a good, he's looked upon as being a good hockey mind, a bright executive. Didn't have a good run in Buffalo, though, before. Now, it's been a while. He went back to being an assistant GM, and he's had a lot of experience in that role between his time in Pittsburgh and then Seattle. So I don't have an issue necessarily with him getting another chance. I hope he does a better job this time around because his tenure in Buffalo was not good. But, yeah, so these guys get promotions after 4 years of not really accomplishing anything. So interesting in my opinion. And on Long Island, we finally get word that Lou Lamoriello is not coming back. His contract is up, and he was notified at the end of the season by ownership that they're not going to renew his contract. So Lou is 82. I believe he turns 83 before the next season starts. It's time for a change there. He was there for 7 years. And when he first came, they really needed him. They needed a breath of fresh air after the snow era. They were in a bad situation, and him and Barry Trotz came and brought stability. Even after losing Captain John Tavares to the Maple Leafs via free agency, a lot of people thought the team was going to really tank and just was, all doom and gloom. And they instead found more success, and the team did a lot better without Tavares than with him. Trotz got a lot out of that team. Lou made some good moves in the beginning time that he was there, but the last probably 3 years, it's been a lot of, there's been no change hardly. Very little change, but yet the results are not great. Like, how can you continue on being a non-playoff team or a first-round exit with these veteran guys that are getting older and slower and not seeing any change? Like, it just was mind-boggling. And the attendance numbers are tanking. The fans are getting frustrated again. They got a new building. They're losing money. It's time for change there. So they are expected to conduct a long, lengthy, extensive search. They're open to a variety of different types of candidates, apparently. So we are going to see, hopefully, a new progressive way of thinking on Long Island when it comes to Patrick Waugh and the assistant coaches. Patrick is technically under contract still for, I think, a couple of years, if I'm not mistaken. And the new GM will be able to make those decisions and decide if there's going to be any other changes within the coaching staff. But for right now, Lou is out. The search begins. Coaching staff remains until that search is complete. So we'll see how that goes. And of course, today the trial started for the 2018 World Junior Canadian players that were facing charges of sexual assault. Of course, we've known about this case for an extended period of time. It feels like it's been forever since the story first broke that this situation allegedly happened, and the alleged victim went to police, and that whole story, it was all summer. I remember that summer a few years ago. It was just like, it was a dominant story. What's going to happen to these players? We're going to find out who it was. It took a long, long, long time for everything to get to the point where it became out public. But of course, 5, which we can say now former NHL players, are facing these allegations. They're all, of course, like I said, everything starts today, so they get to enter their plea. They all pled not guilty. It includes Michael McLeod, who's facing, I think he has one extra charge on out of all the players. There's Carter Hart, there's Dylan Dubé, there's Cal Foote, and of course Alex Formanton. So there's those 5 players that are facing charges. They get to enter their pleas. The jury selection took place today. I believe they have 14 jurors. 2 are considered alternates. So that part has been done. And then they did announce, the prosecution did say that they named a whole bunch of people who could be called as witnesses. Doesn't mean they all will be, but they're all potential witnesses that could be called to testify. And they pretty much named every player that was on that roster that's not facing charges. So, I know I've seen several articles today kind of name dropping some of these guys. That's really, you could have just put the whole roster, but Cale Makar was on that team. Drake Batherson was on that team. Robert Thomas of the Blues was on that team. There's quite a few others as well. Taylor Radish of the Capitals. I think there's like the four. I think those are the only four guys, if I'm not mistaken, that are currently in the playoffs right now. I think the rest of the players are either not in the NHL or they're in the offseason, I think. I don't have the roster right in front of me, but basically, if they were on that team and they're not facing charges, it's quite possible they could be called as to testify, to see what they know on the situation. And we also learned that those players do not have to appear in person. They will be permitted to do their testimony via Zoom remotely. So for those that are in the playoffs, they don't have to leave their teams or travel or anything like that. So, and of course, like I said, we don't know. It's expected to last upwards of I think it's 8 to 10 weeks. So, I mean, we're probably looking at mid to late June is when this is going to come to an end and we will get a verdict. But for right now, that's what we know on the first day of the trial. And we'll see what else we learn as they go through the process. Now, as I mentioned as well, with the word today of the change of regime coming for the Islanders, we know the Montreal Canadiens are a team that, of course, are in the playoffs right now, had a season that was, I think, fair to say, ahead of schedule, certainly exceeded expectations. They're, a rebuilding team that weren't expected to make the playoffs yet, but like I said, just had a real good year. They're ahead of where they were, and obviously, as much as they're happy with that, they are expected to continue to make moves this offseason to build on that. The main area that seems to be a focus for this team moving forward is a number 2 center. More specifically, a centerman that's more appropriate for Ivan Demidov. Demidov showed flashes of brilliance in his first NHL game. Obviously, we'll see how things go for him, but he looks like he has potential to be a special player, which shouldn't come as a surprise based on what we saw of him leading into his draft year and all that. It looks like, they've got themselves a real good one. Now, right now, he's playing with Alex Newhook and Patrick Laine. Not really a great line for him. To be honest, I don't really think him and Laine are going to be line mates long term. Ideally, their styles don't really complement each other. I don't think Newhook has more potential with Demidov because they're both great skaters. But Newhook, to me, is more of a number 3 guy. He doesn't really have that high enough end skill to really be the ideal center. He can do it for now, but long term, they need an upgrade there. A proper number 2 center. We know Christian Dvorak, who's a pending UFA, pretty much guaranteed not to return to the team. Jake Evans has been re-signed. He'll be the number 4 guy. You slot Newhook down, you bring in a number 2, then you're even deeper at center, and all the lines are just a little bit lined up a little bit better the way they should be. And a lot of talk today was centered around the Islanders because of, we know that team is going through transition, going through change, and could they target a player like Matthew Barzal? Now, we've heard Barzal's name in and out of rumors before. Generally speaking, he's not a name that's out there a lot when it comes to trade talk. But we know the Islanders are a team that needs to make changes. Montreal has a lot of prospects, a lot of picks, and basically this is not even from NHL insiders, just as more of a fan-driven trade suggestion, if you will. More specifically on the Montreal side, I've seen a ton of Habs fans talking about targeting the Islanders, and if either Horvat or Barzal, one of those centermen there with the Islanders, would be a prime target for Montreal, and maybe that's who the Canadiens should be talking to for an offseason trade move. You're looking at a lot of young prospects. They got Mailloux, they got Reinbacher, they got Hage, they've got multiple first-round picks. There's lots to like. Joshua Wall is another one that could be moved. It wouldn't shock me if they moved Jack Guy, to be honest, either. There's all these pieces that could be included for a big upgrade. And would that be enough to entice a team like the Islanders to perk up and be like, yeah, you know what, maybe we should consider that. We need to get younger. We need to get more skilled. But trading Barzal is not overly old and very skilled. Might not be the best way to accomplish that. So it might be a bit of a pipe dream for Montreal. But I understand the sentiment from the fan base that they would be the ideal player for them to target. If you think about how he could complement Ivan Demidov, makes a lot of sense. From Montreal's side of it. I would, based on what we had heard from Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon before, I won't be shocked in the least if they're willing to give up multiple assets like that to get that kind of player, because it's a very important piece to that team to take a step forward. So I fully expect it's going to happen in some capacity. We just don't know who it's going to end up being. But if Barzal were the guy, yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense. The only thing with the Islanders is they're not going to rebuild. They're not going to start selling everything off. I mean, they've got a world-class goaltender in Ilya Sorokin. We don't know about Varlamov. I've heard some talk that Varlamov might return. He might not be able to. We don't really know the full extent of that. But either way, they've got a world-class goalie in Sorokin, who's under contract for a long time. Yeah, they've got a decent decor. They could use a little bit of new infusion back there as well. But they certainly made some changes as the year went on back there, and it's it could be better, but it's a work in progress. I think Mayfield's a player they'd like to move on from. But Pelech, Dobson, there's obviously room to improve that back there and have a couple of young prospect D come in via trade wouldn't be terrible. Up front, though, they certainly need more of an ability to score. There's no doubt they need to get faster. And trading Barzal kind of defeats the purpose of that. That's why I really don't think it's going to happen. Same thing with Horvat. I just think those are the guys you're going to hang on to. I think they'd be more likely to maybe, because I know a lot of people thought they would re-sign Palmieri. Well, you know what? Maybe the new regime says that's not a good idea. Maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe they don't bring back Captain Anders Lee. Maybe they move on from him. They traded Brock Nelson. Maybe there's more of the older regime. Maybe they move Pajot, maybe they move on from Casey Cizikas. These types of players have been there forever. They're more likely. But now, of course, they're also probably tougher to move too. It's not that simple, but I just don't know that this is the ideal, solution for the Islanders. It is for the Canadiens, but I don't know. But it also is going to largely depend too on who the new GM is and how they value and view everything. And we don't know that. And until we do, it's going to be difficult to really pinpoint what the Islanders are going to do this offseason. So let me know your thoughts. Is a guy like Barzal a prime target or should be a prime target for Montreal? Do you see a scenario where they could offer up a bunch of these young assets to the Islanders to intrigue them enough to make them want to pull the trigger? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, as well as all the other news of the day as well. And we'll talk about it further in the comment section. Enjoy the playoffs tonight, and I'll catch you next time.